Blitz. You are, well, definitely one of the best in the world in that. And I wanted to ask you whether you have any like Blitz improvement routines, Blitz improvement plans for your self-development in this area, because you are mostly focused on playing this kind of time format nowadays. And it seems that many people like yourself have made a whole career focusing on Blitz and sometimes even neglecting completely classical chess or playing very rarely. So I assume that you also have some training routine for your Blitz improvement or something like that. Or maybe you're just a genius and it comes to you naturally. So please share your secrets.
So in terms of what I do to train, what I have done to train, again, in large part, this is just playing insane amounts of games, particularly these long matches against Hikaru and some of the other Blitz greats on chess.com, Ali Reza. We used to play all the time, not just bullet, but also long 3-minute matches. And some of the top players on chess.com, that has helped me more than anything because to zero in on my matches with Hikaru, he has taught me through our matches so many things that I was not doing at all. And by implementing those things, sometimes there's a period where you force yourself to implement them and your rating drops and you start disbelieving in, okay, this is not for me. But eventually, if you're stubborn and you truly believe that this is a positive change in your play, it's going to help and it's going to integrate itself into your style. Let me give you a few examples.
Yeah, I wanted to ask for examples.
First of all, the biggest thing I did, and I think I included it in that Blitz article I wrote for chess.com a couple of years ago, I did a quick study of some of Hikaru's Blitz games, and I found that in the vast majority of his games, he thinks for 15 seconds, let's take 3+0. He thinks for 15 seconds or more, like usually once per game, like exactly once per game. He takes a think of 15 seconds or more, sometimes twice, but very rarely 3 times or more. So he plays incredibly fast. What does that mean? Does that mean he pre-moves a lot? No, it means like a lot of his moves are made, particularly in the middle game, in sort of like 3 to 5 seconds. So if you compare me to like other top Blitz players, I try to play fast in general. And I try to play very, very fast in complex positions, which at first produced that drop because I would blunder a lot. But then I kind of realized how to do this properly. If you take 5 to 10 seconds, you can usually blunder check pretty effectively. This, Greg, I think is where I rely on my perhaps biggest Blitz strength, which is quick recognition, again, of short tactics. Like I tend to blunder check pretty reliably. I don't blunder a lot in Blitz. And when I take 5 to 10 seconds, I can calculate quite a few short variations to ensure that I'm not making big blunders. I also think I have a pretty good tactical intuition. So when I go for a sacrifice, people assume that I've calculated everything. Usually, no. It's that I've spent that time trying to assess the likelihood that my opponent will deal with the problems that I've posed in the time that he has left to spend. And Hikaru is so good at this. Like he almost never goes for unsound sacks. His play in Blitz is incredibly solid, but when he does go for sacks, they're almost always well thought out. His pieces end up on the right squares at the right time. So by forcing myself to play faster throughout the game, I'm also relying on my other strength, of course, which is just time scramble ability. So often when I enter these time scrambles, I've got just a few seconds more than my opponent, which allows me to win so many games by flagging. Yes, I win a lot of games by flagging. Again, happy to admit that. What are some other things? Openings. The other big thing is I trusted the traditional wisdom that openings are not important in Blitz, right? This is kind of how I thought of it initially. What you play in Blitz doesn't matter because ultimately the game is not going to be decided in the opening. And people listening might say, yeah, you just said that. You gave the example of Gukesh's B4, right? And how in Blitz, these decisions are not that important. But here's the subtle difference. In the early middle game, these small positional decisions are not important at all. But actually the opening that you play, the first 3 or 4 moves are incredibly important. And one thing that has changed my level entirely, and I think this is responsible for my rise. If you take my chess.com Blitz rating, I was hovering around 2,900, 3,000 for a long time. And now I have drops. I have bad periods, but usually I'm around 3,100 to 3,150. That rise, I think, is because I carefully tailored an opening repertoire specifically to Blitz. I went through my openings and figured out what openings maximize my ability in Blitz, which is to say, get the types of positions that allow me to bring out my strengths. With White, I essentially eliminated all moves except 1e4. And I tried to take the position into the territory of tactical middle games, particularly with an open center, and avoid long mainstream theory that has always been my weakness in classical too. So for instance, Alapin against c5, I almost play exclusively. Against e4, e5, I play the Gleck system, 4 knights with g3, which is almost never played at the GM level. And my results are insane because I've analyzed it, not deeply, but enough so that I understand the basic ideas. And this is what people don't understand. This is what Jospam does so well, by the way. Sorry to, again, I'm not bringing him up for any reason other than to say, if you look at his games, he plays the same stuff over and over again. And it's not theoretically challenging. If you run it on Stockfish, he plays variations that are not going to beat Gukesh in Classical. They're just like dead equal, or sometimes White is even slightly worse. But that's not the point. He's studied the typical ideas in the middle game, so he's able to play really, really fast. And because he's a more positional player, he's chosen openings that tend to get the types of positions, the types of structures that he's just more confident in. And because he's played a million games in those structures, you actually start getting really like uncannily good at playing fast and relatively accurately in certain middle games. So a narrow opening repertoire, which is carefully chosen and suited to your strengths, is a huge game changer, I think, at all levels in Blitz, but especially at sort of the higher levels. But this is very much applicable also to people who are passionate about getting better and are not titled. Choose your openings carefully, and your Blitz repertoire, if you're an active classical player, can have nothing to do with your classical repertoire. With Black, I now play the Alekhine against d4. In classical, I play e4, e5. In Blitz, I almost never play e4, e5. In classical, I play 1 d4 and 1 knight f3. And in Blitz, I almost never play those moves. I play 1 e4 almost exclusively. Same with the Jababa London. So openings are much more important in Blitz and even in Bullet than people realize. Those are like two really, really big things. And of course, also just integrating feedback. If I lose a match by many points, if I find an opponent that I struggle against in Blitz, I try to figure out why. Because at my level, I basically play the same people. So if somebody has my number, and that shouldn't happen rating-wise, like with Hikaru, I lose to him because he's Hikaru. With someone like David Paravian, I really struggle against him in Blitz. And I try to ask myself, what are the things he does that cause me to struggle? And I identify certain factors, and that kind of just tells me, okay, those are my big weaknesses. This is what I need to try to improve over time in Blitz. And the biggest thing, of course, just experience, playing consistently. And I'm not trying to justify my Blitz addiction here, but I guess I am.